Let's Get To presents Go Go Astros, a focus on H-Town hardball.
And good morning and welcome to Go Astros. It's a fun week this week, Andy, because this is the week where Brian lives in a house divided. Brian, are you guys ready for the first three Astros Red Sox games over there at home?
Here's an indication of how the Red Sox season has been going. My wife hasn't mentioned it.
Wow. Oh yeah. I mean, they definitely are 10 games under 500. You know, Andy, it's a little bit different situation than when we recorded last week because this time the Astros have lost. I would like to be the voice of Astros Twitter and want to know how many people we can DFA and when.
Well, I mean, objectively, this week was worse than last week, right? We only went 5-1.
100% more losses this week than last week.
And that damn Yuli Gurriel keeps messing with my expectations of him, and I don't like it. I either want him to suck or be awesome, and he's somewhere in the middle.
You know, obviously Javier had the awful start, Brian, although it did turn into a day where everyone just sort of decided to suck. That was pitching. But what did you see out of Javier? I mean, blip on the radar, do you think, or something that people should be concerned about?
Yeah, I'm more on the blip of the radar school that, you know, we've got, what is it, like 6 or 7 really good outings from this year and one disastrous one. That happens to everybody. And yeah. And, you know, we saw that also with the bullpen, which has been very good. And as you said, everyone decided to contribute to the loss on Saturday. That happens. You know, you'll get an easier touch in the lineup when Javier faces the Rangers later this week.
There you go. You know, one of the things I was thinking about, and so I was listening to on the road to Mississippi back and forth. So I listened to Fridays and Sundays game in the car, and Chris Gordy, who I generally speaking like, you know, personality on 790, kept talking about how there's a clear indication that the Angels are going to dog the Astros all year. Andy, is there a clear indication of anything 33 games in? I mean, it's so weird because on the one hand, he's talking about how the Angels are going to dog us for all year. And then on the other hand, wow, it's a miracle that Yuli brought his batting average up 240 points. Isn't it just that we're only 30 games in?
It's not Memorial Day.
Right.
The Angels are benefiting from the fact that they found some starting pitching so far this year, and that Trout and Ohtani have stayed healthy so far. And everybody in baseball is hoping, probably except for the exception of the Astros, is hoping that Trout can stay healthy for an entire season. He hasn't done that in a while. Ohtani's, I think the 2021 season was the first year he's been 100% healthy. And that was even coming off of a UCL surgery. So good for them. I don't think they have the depth. They certainly don't have the playoff experience and the experience of being in a race all year long. We'll see what happens, but yeah, we're 30 games in. We're not quite a quarter of the way of the season done. So there's a lot that you could project out of numbers right now. I think the best thing you can say about the Angels is their run differential is the second best in baseball right at the moment. That means they're doing things correctly. And good for them because it's been a decade, maybe more. But you know, the Astros are right there with them, so I'm not sweating it right at the moment.
Brian, what do you think, man?
Yeah, it's too early to go. I'm seeing people on Twitter and on Facebook going game by game of who has the lead and who doesn't. And you know, every bit of baseball watching I've ever done in my life tells me don't do that until August.
Yeah, I mean, even last year, the Astros were in second place in the division after the first week. It felt like for the first 2 months of the season, like the A's had at some points a 4-game lead.
I am certain, and I know we've bitched about this a lot, but I am certain this is the footballification of baseball. You've got a bunch of football fans who found the Astros around 2017 and do not understand that losing a game doesn't affect or even a series doesn't affect your futures quite like losing a division game in the NFL or losing a conference game in college football. It's not the same thing. You can really almost measure it in weeks, where if you have a winning week, it's like winning a single college football game or NFL game. the Astros are doing that right now, and they've really done that since the second or third week of the season. So,
Brian, I cut you off earlier.
Yeah, no, it's too early. Yeah. Here's the thing we said about the Angels. I think every year for the last decade, Andy's right. It's been a decade since the playoffs, since 2012, which is they have the greatest talent in baseball. They since then have added an even greater talent in Ohtani. And what they just need is for the rest of the roster to perform as average and let their superstars take them over. And so they've done that for 33 games for 6 weeks. Congratulations. Baseball seasons are 162 games. So could they do that? Absolutely. I think I said in the offseason is, hey, this could be the year where that happens for the Angels, but am I going to bet on that? No, because I've watched the last 10 seasons of baseball.
I bet on my very first time I bet on a single Astros game. I bet on Saturday for them to win. I could have just lit that $25 on fire and had at least gotten to see fire.
There are many ways to lose $25 at a Biloxi casino, and from that standpoint, it's probably one of the better ones.
Yeah. I'm not stealing all my talking points from 790, although I am going to steal one. And it was an interesting conversation, and I think it was funny they had that Michael Connor was having with Sean Salisbury this morning, because they kept having to throw the caveats in, almost like they could predict the Twitter hate. But it was an honest discussion about Michael Brantley this year. He has not been the same hitter. He's only hitting about 273, and he's hitting all singles. Obviously, Michael Brantley is not going anywhere, but it made me start to think, and we'll start with you, Andy, looking at the first 33-ish games, where is a couple of areas that you're starting to kind of maybe think this is a long-term issue that needs to be addressed?
I look at it kind of a different way. I don't think Brantley is a long-term issue that needs to be addressed because he's not long-term for the franchise. This is the last year of a 2-year contract. We were very thankful that he signed with us last year. It was a move that worked. It got us to the World Series. The cost of getting him last year was the contract for this year. And it's just part of doing business. The Astros do not have, well, I take that back. They do not have, or did not walk into the season with a ready left fielder to replace him in the minor leagues. There wasn't just a whole lot, unless you want Michael Conforto, who I don't think has signed anywhere yet, to play one of your corner outfield spots.
No, they were just waiting though. Remember, like, we're
going to shift Tucker into center and have Maldonado pitch, and there was a whole lot of machinations that needed to happen for that Conforto sighting that still has not happened anywhere.
Yeah, but Conforto got injured and is out for the season. So,
how did he get injured? He wasn't playing anywhere. Is this a video game?
Scott Morris is your agent. Apparently, he has ways of making you.
Now, I do think the calculus has changed a little bit, because you've had a really, and again, it's very early in the season, but Pedro Leon has looked really, really good the last couple of weeks in AAA, and is starting to hit consistently to all fields with power. And he's the guy the Astros have projected to be an outfielder sooner rather than later in the majors. I don't know if they're expecting it this season, but I think Brantley is enough veteran and has enough rope that, yes, you're concerned that the production is not where you would hope it would be, but he's still we're still in the 30 game range of, okay, he absolutely could be Yuli Gurriel, put together a weekend long streak and have his average back over 300. Gurriel, we talked about Twitter a minute ago. Everybody in the world wanted to just outright him last Monday. This Monday, had a good weekend against one of the worst teams in baseball, and all of a sudden he's a hero again. And I'm leaning more towards the Gurriel as a hero guy than the Gurriel as a GOAT guy. But, we've got to, I guess part of being a fan is not having that thermometer or barometer of, letting things level out and just watch what happens, because I think we're premature on Gurriel, or certainly we're premature on Gurriel. People were premature on Altuve earlier this year. And I think we're being a little premature on Brantley, but it is something to watch, because he is getting to that age where production is going to slow down. And Father Time is undefeated.
I'll make the same caveat. Like I'm in no way, shape, or form thinking we do anything with Michael Brantley, because I think he also brings a lot of other things to the table outside of just whether he can hit for some power or not. You know, going back to Leon, sorry, go ahead.
James.
Sorry, I guess well, all I'm saying is that if this is the farewell tour for Michael Brantley as an Astro, I'm okay with that. I'm okay with giving him every chance to right the ship.
Brian.
Michael Brantley is performing at the same level he did last year. It's just the level of offense in baseball has declined. He had a 119 OPS plus last year. He's at 121 this season, had 123 weighted runs created plus last year. He's at 124 this season. What's the difference? His numbers are down, but that's because numbers are down across baseball. He's performing the same as he has last year, which is a little down from his career norms. He's an older player. He's had a much bigger platoon split in recent years than he did in his prime when he was with the then Indians, now Guardians. But Michael Brantley is, not a top level offensive player, but he's a positive contributing offensive player. And I'm not worried about Michael Brantley at all.
Well, again, this was supposed to enter the conversation of what to worry about. I'm also not worried about Michael Brantley.
We love Michael Brantley.
But Andy brought up Pedro Leon. I see Pedro Leon as addressing what has been, if you add it all together, a very underperforming center field position, especially if Jake Myers doesn't come back at all, which is starting to feel him and Lance McCullers, or doesn't come back or comes back and doesn't play like he did last year. Brian.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think they're going to re-sign Brantley this offseason. He'll be a free agent, as Andy said. This offseason, they'll need to replace him, and they'll need to figure out what to do at first base, whether that's continue with Gurriel on another one-year contract or find a replacement for him. So what happens with Pedro Leon and Jake Myers and Chas McCormick and Jose Siri, if you can find two starters out of those four, that would be really helpful for the 2023 Astros. Could Leon come up this year? Yeah, if one of the outfielders went down, that might be a place they look to add somebody. But again, I think that's more of a conversation for 2023. What my worry?
Yes, absolutely.
Ryan Presley. He's not striking guys out. And obviously, at the beginning of the season, we thought that we noticed his velocity was down, but he had decent performance and then sort of tailed off in the first week of the season. And then he went on the IL and we thought, okay, well, maybe it's the knee issue. He's come back. He's pitched okay in his appearances since then, but he's striking out like 4 guys every 9 innings, as opposed to at his peak, 12 guys per 9 innings. It's concerning.
Andy, where are you sitting on that concern? Also keeping in mind that it does seem like if there's a year for Ryan Presley to not have it, this might be the year because of how strong the rest of the bullpen is.
I mean, that's kind of where I am on Presley. I like Ryan Presley. I think Ryan Presley has been a very effective acquisition from us since we got him from the Twins 4 years ago. I am always concerned with pitchers have knee injuries, especially Ryan Presley, because the Astros don't communicate effectively, I think, as Mr. Kaplan has said, or they don't communicate, in a way that would be helpful for anybody. And so you don't really know the extent of his injury. I have to assume because he's on the active roster, because he's making appearances, that he is as healthy as he can be. Having said that, to your point, Jim, you've got Montero, you've got Stanek, you've got other pieces in the bullpen that can pick up his slack. And if he loses his role as a closer, my only real concern about Ryan Presley is how much payroll he's eating up. But even with that, we're so far under the luxury tax that the Astros don't get a big pass on me on guys eating up payroll right now.
It's funny. And we'll go, if you and I go back to when Ryan Presley was named the closer, you and I always kind of had question marks about it because he's just not, at least what the typical closer model was that we were used to, particularly in Houston. He's not a very hard thrower, blah, 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 blah. So I don't know. To me, it seems like Neris or Montero at this point could step into that spot. Brian, I want to start with you on the next question. And this is where, Andy and I are really hard on Dusty Baker. So I want to go to you first because people that listen to the show will know that we're just grinding axes again. But it does seem like we saw some really questionable bullpen uses in part with Hector Neris both being up 7 runs and down 7 runs. When you've got a guy, something called a Seth Martinez, sitting in the bullpen that seems perfectly designed to eat up those types of innings. Questionable to you, or am I just missing the point?
It's a little bit questionable. I think it's very clear they have Presley as their closer, and Montero has very clearly established himself as the number 2 reliever in the Astros in Dusty's mind. And they're more willing to stay, in the doubleheader in Minnesota, they were more willing to save him for the second game. Because that got close. And so Neris kind of does more filling in than I think we had projected at the beginning of the season. He's, with that being said, he's pitched really well and done well, and I have lots of confidence in him. And I'd be very happy to have Neris, Montero, and then Presley pitch the 7th, 8th, and 9th tonight.
Andy?
I mean, I don't like the closer concept to begin with, and I know that's not necessarily a controversial take. I think I would rather have pitchers in a bullpen perspective that are used depending on the matchup and depending on the situation, regardless of what inning it is. Sure. I don't really buy the idea that the 9th inning is so sacrosanct that you can't have this guy has to pitch the 9th inning because it is so vital to his makeup that I don't think that's real. I'm sure, like lineup construction, it's not a real thing. We like to harp on it as fans though.
You've won someone over, Brian. Congratulations.
Having said all that, hey, Jose Siri had a good weekend, so I don't want to kill him anymore. It's just Dusty is always going to be inconsistent and weird with his bullpen usage, and that's up to and including getting guys warmed up in blowouts that don't need to be warming up in blowouts. I don't have any idea what Hector Neris's work pattern needed to be. I don't know if he was going to throw regardless. And there is some of that in a 162 game season. You're going to throw today. You need to. They're in the middle of a huge swath of games, 33 and 34 days. It doesn't lighten up anytime soon. So it makes those kind of usage, having Hector Neris warm up in a blowout game doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me in that perspective, but there's also a bigger picture. And I've got to trust that our pitching coaches are having some input on what Dusty is doing and not doing with warming guys up. And I will say, I made the comment offhand online this weekend. The Astros pitching is better without Brent Strom this year. So how overrated was Brent Strom?
So the Diamondbacks pitching is better. So
fine.
Now, he's improved 2 organizations.
Yeah, Diamondbacks have a winning record. Shocking.
Remember, Andy, not Memorial Day.
That's right.
Not Memorial Day, James.
I'm just saying, for a Diamondbacks fan, I know some Diamondback fans, and this is their World Series to have a
they should enjoy it, yes, and not
to have a winning record on May 16th. They are.
Hey, I'm glad we got the split against them.
So it looks like, the Astros do have the Red Sox. You're right, though, Andy. I was looking at the schedule, and it's another, 13 games in a row, I think, left before they have an off day. It also feels like they still have a lot of these chunks where it's much longer road trips than the homestands they're having in between. Obviously, it's going to balance that out because I don't think the Astros lost any home games when it came to this reshuffling. Like, say, I think the Oakland Athletics did. They lost at least 1 or 2. That tells me if they can stay, talking about the way the calendar turns, if they can stay where they are, feast on some of these poor performing teams, they should be primed and ready for a stretch run at the end of the season.
Hey, the Astros are always a weird team, though. I mean, we've played 26 road games and only 13 home games so far. That's a little bit of an imbalance this deep into the season. I know it's only 30 games, but you'd like to see that closer to about half and half.
15, yeah.
but that will all balance out. We're not losing any home games, even with the shuffling. We have a horrible doubleheader against the Yankees, as a matter of fact, to make up for it at home. Yay.
And then a random 1-game series in the middle of the All-Star
right
break.
after the All-Star break or something. It's all very weird. The Astros are always weird to me, though, because since we've had this run of success, with I think the exception of 2017, we're not a great home team. At least it doesn't feel that way. I'm sure we can pull out records and say, well, they're fine or they're better than league average.
Ryan's doing that now.
But it seems to be that it has always felt like they play better away from Minute Maid Park than they do at Minute Maid Park, especially offensively. And I don't know if that's just me anecdotally thinking that's true and it's not really true, or there's truly something weird with the batting eye in Houston that our hitters just don't do well with, because it's not a season thing. It feels like our offense is a little bit suppressed in Minute Maid Park.
And so took out the hill.
Maybe it was the flagpole in play. I don't know. But you would like to think if everything is normal in a baseball season, home teams play better at home. We will have a bunch of home games the remainder of the season, relatively. And I think looking at the August and September schedule, that's when we start evening up. So we have a bunch of home games versus very few road games at the mid-August through the end of the season. So, that all balances out. But I think it's interesting that my perception is that the Astros play better on the road, and we've had a lot of road games, and that's kind of gotten us out of some of the doldrums we were in earlier in the season.
All right, Brian, come back to the
I'm
actual
wrong.
numbers, please.
So I have not looked up the numbers here, but I do know this year the Astros schedule right now is lightening up. They don't play a team that's in playoff position until they play the Mets in the latter half of June. So they're on this big streak here against some decent teams. Minnesota's in playoff position, who they swept. And now they have a chance to, again, continue that against competition that is, and again, obviously the Red Sox are probably better than what they've shown this year. And I hope they don't figure that out in the next 3 days. Mostly for my marriage's sake, and mostly with bragging rights at my house. But, they continue to play teams that are not in playoff position, that are mostly 500 or below, and have an opportunity to rack up a lot of wins here in the next month.
So that's an interesting point that you brought up. And I hate to agree with Yankees fan, but I was reading a Yankees fan talking about a lot of people are like, well, the Yankees haven't played anybody so far. And this was after they just dismantled Chicago, who's supposed to be a good team this week.
And played well this year.
And there was a lot of, well, your schedule's been soft so far and it'll harden up. There aren't a lot of good teams. And it's the disparity. We've seen this in the last few years, but there just aren't a lot of good baseball teams right now. There might be 4 or 5 in all of the American League, and I haven't paid that much attention to the National League, but I think it kind of shakes out the same. The Mets are playing well. The Dodgers are certainly playing well. Milwaukee, maybe. And then what do you have? So there's a lot of teams hoping to get to 500, and everybody plays them. So I don't know how valid your schedule has been soft so far parts. Yeah, there's going to be harder opponents, but we are lucky to have a bunch of Rangers and Oakland games coming up. But the Yankees get to play Baltimore and Boston. Everybody's got some crappy teams in their division. So there's just not a lot of competitive baseball teams playing right now. It's kind of weird. And again, only 33 games, but it's still, you typically see more teams hovering around or a little bit over 500 at this point.
Yeah, no, I do feel like just even my cursory glance at things, it feels a lot more have and have naughty than it has naughty. More haves and have not separation than we had seen in other years. And just looking at, the Reds won didn't they win 5 of 6 and they still only won 9 games? It's been a lot more, it seems like a lot more teams bottoming out. And I don't know if that's, I don't know why that is, but it does seem that that's what's happening, Brian.
The Reds managed to lose
with the White Sox doing poorly, the entire AL Central looks all of that. Like there's not a real good team there, and someone's going to win it with 86 games maybe.
Yeah, I don't recall us just squeaking by the Twins earlier this week. Those were pretty decisive games. And that right now is the cream of their division.
I saw a Twins fan I follow on Twitter in the middle of the Verlander no-hit bid. I mean, like, I think the Twins are kind of AL Central kind of good.
That's exactly what Andy told me. I was like, hey, I thought the fighting Andrew Nelsons, as we often refer to it in our community, were supposed to be good. And Andy said they were good for an AL Central team, which I guess is fair. It's been rough. Now, looking at the strength of schedule that's remaining, the Astros, according to Power Rankings Guru, I don't know if that's a good website or not, but they basically have about middle of the road left. They have the number 18 strength of schedule remaining. So, the Blue Jays have the hardest remaining, and that's been really rough to watch because they are not playing nearly as well as a lot of us thought they were going to be.
But again, I think that's 30 games. It's so early.
I know it's 30 games, but we have to talk about something.
We do, but I don't think the Yankees are going to continue to win at a 74% clip. That's just, it's not maintainable, first of all. And Giancarlo Stanton is going to break something at some point, and not a bat over his head, but it's probably coming. There's just a lot of, the Yankees are a very good team, and I think they figured it out. And I think they actually figured out that if I have somebody who can play defense at short, I don't need him to hit home runs.
Right.
And they've done that at a couple of positions. I think we talked about that earlier. The Angels have managed to stay healthy so far. The Dodgers have bought the best player they can possibly buy at every position, so that's good for them. The Mets are finally winning. So there's some interesting stories, but you look at it and I just don't know how much of it is short spurts, you're doing well, and how much of it's maintainable long-term over. And that's one of the things that makes the Major League Baseball season so great, is that there aren't any pretenders at the end of the year. You can certainly get hot in the playoffs. We've been on the wrong end of that stick a couple of times in the World Series. But to get to the point that you make the playoffs, that's not a fluke. Those teams have proved it over 162 game schedule, and it's brutal, and it doesn't feel brutal because it's not football and you're not hitting people and getting concussions and breaking arms and all that kind of stuff. But the day in, day out grind is real, and the teams that are there at the end are the teams that deserve to be there at the end. And that's one of the things that makes baseball so great, and one of the reasons a lot of us whine about expanding the playoffs.
Yeah, I mean, I'm one who whines about that because I do like the idea that it's a 162 game marathon. It's why I care about winning the division. I don't want to see that. I don't want to have winning the division become irrelevant like it was in 2020, when clearly the Astros knew they were going to make the playoffs and made certain choices. Brian, before we jump out of here, though, we did actually have the team get improved, bringing in Mauricio Dubón. Just thoughts from both of you guys, starting Brian on I think improving at least that utility infield / outfield position.
Yeah, he replaces on the roster Nico Goodrum, who struck out more than half of his at bats. So may have been a mistake to sign Nico Goodrum, but they seem to have addressed that relatively quickly and with a relatively small cost of your fourth or fifth best catcher in the organization. Dubón, my cursory look at his numbers after they acquired him shows he's really good. He's got positive numbers of defense at multiple positions, including center field. He's really good against left-handed pitching, so if they can spot him well against that, work. And he's a utility infielder. If he gets 200 at-bats this year, hopefully there's some useful ones, but mostly, remember, this is the roster spot occupied last year by Robel Garcia. And so I'll give the same analysis that I gave for Nico Goodrum. All he needs to be is better than Robel Garcia. Tragically, not something we can say about Nico Goodrum.
So better than replacement value is now better than Robel Garcia value.
That's
it's a good pickup. I do, to Brian's point, the Astros made a mistake signing Nico Goodrum, it appears, and they addressed it quickly. We're not letting this linger into midseason. I think you have some questions around, and I think they're minor questions. I'm not alarmed by it, but our middle infielders, Altuve and Pena, have nagging injuries. So you picked up a guy who prevents you from having to see Aledmus Diaz playing shortstop. So that's a big thing. Long term, he's probably going to get more looks in center field than he got in San Francisco because of the uncertainty we have in center field. He's a high energy guy from what I could tell from clips. The Giants fans seem to really like him, which to me means that he probably came up big in a couple of moments. And I did the one that kept coming up on Twitter yesterday was that he hit a big home run off Clayton Kershaw against the Dodgers, which is maybe the biggest, most bloody rivalry in baseball that's not talked about. And then did the Bauer sword crossing as he crossed the plate. So he's got a little bit of swag to him, which I don't have a problem with. And he's a guy that can rise to the moment and provide us some steady defense when Pena needs a breather or Altuve needs a breather. That's an improvement because Nico Goodrum could do neither of those things.
And I'll add this one fun fact that I learned from Robert Ford, who posted this on Twitter shortly after the trade. Dubón was born in Honduras. There's been only one other Major League Baseball player born in Honduras, and that is former Astros legend Gerald Young, who I had no idea was Honduran. So I also learned that here. So shout out to Gerald Young wherever you are.
I was going to say, does Gerald Young know he's Honduran?
All right, last thing. Anybody see Jeremy Pena's first press interaction post his injury where all he kept talking about was how he had discomfort? It looked like someone who had been captured behind enemy lines and was being tortured and doing his best to repeat nothing but name, rank, and serial number. You guys see that?
I, for one, welcome my bug overlords.
Brian?
It is good to know the Astros orientation program is so effective.
I just hope they've gotten away from the Clockwork Orange eye prying, open, and discomfort.
Discomfort, not pain, not swelling, discomfort. He apparently heard no pop. Hopefully he'll be back because we Astros could use the pop in the lineup. That's going to be it for us. We'll be back next week, hopefully talking about another, 6 or 7 game win streak. Until then, guys, go Stros.
Go Stros.
Viva Honduras. Go Stros.
Go Astros is a presentation from Twitchy Dolphin Media and part of the Let's Get To Baseball Network.